Dr. Toomer, could you state your full name for the record, please?
My name is Jethro W. Toomer.
And what is your occupation, Doctor?
I'm a psychologist.
Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
I have a bachelor's, master's, and PhD degree in psychology. My bachelor's degree is from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. My master's and PhD degrees are from Temple University in Philadelphia. I completed a year's postdoctoral internship at Moss Rehabilitation Center, which is a part of Albert Einstein Hospital in Philadelphia. I'm a diplomate of the American Board of Professional Psychology, which gives me reciprocity to practice in all 50 states. I'm also licensed to practice psychology in the state of Florida.
What is a diplomate in psychology? How does one become that?
A diplomate is the highest standard of achievement in the field of psychology. It requires 7 years of practice in the field after earning the PhD degree and a series of rigorous examinations.
Are you currently in private practice?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience prior to the current practice?
Presently, I'm involved in the practice of clinical and forensic psychology in Miami, Florida. I also have privileges at 2 hospitals where I'm involved in treatment and assessment of adolescents as well as adults. In addition to my private practice, I'm also a tenured full professor at Florida International University in Miami, and I direct the graduate training program in mental health counseling.
You indicated you have some experience in the area of adolescent psychology. Can you talk to us a little bit about that, what that is? Just explain that for us.
Part of my practice involves working with adults as well as adolescents. By virtue of that particular distinction, oftentimes there are differences in terms of diagnosis, in terms
Excuse me,
of...
Dr. Yana, we stipulate the doctor's qualifications and his testimony be acceptable as an expert.
Yes, right. If you could just finish in the area of the adolescent psychology, because it may relate to your testimony.
There are just differences in terms of nuances and in terms of rendering a differential diagnosis with regard to adolescent behavior as opposed to adult behavior.
And you've heard Mr. Tanner just stipulate to your expertise. You have testified in court of law previously, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
And you've been retained as an expert witness by the defense, the state, and appointed by the court in criminal cases.
That is correct, yes.
And you've tested, and you've been retained also in civil proceedings, I take it.
Yes, I have.
Your Honor, we would tend to Dr. Toomer at this juncture as an expert witness.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you know Aileen Wuornos, the person seated to my right?
Yes, I do.
You had the opportunity to evaluate her.
Yes, I did.
Have you reviewed testing regarding Ms. Wuornos?
Yes, I have.
Have you reviewed the testing of Dr. McMahon and Dr. Bordini?
Yes, I have.
Have you reviewed the notes and the notes and other materials from Dr. Bernard, Dr. McMahon, Dr. Cobb, and Dr. Bordini?
Yes, I have reviewed documents from all of those doctors.
In conducting an evaluation, did you review other materials, collateral data regarding Ms. Wuornos, her case, and her history?
That is correct.
Did you have an opportunity to look at, and I'll just do a shotgun list to save you time, depositions, transcripts, police reports, investigatory reports, prior school records, prior records regarding Ms. Wuornos, witness statements, statements of people who knew her, transcripts of those statements, and prior mental health evaluations?
Yes, I did.
Did you also have an opportunity to review current records regarding Ms. Wuornos?
Yes, I did. I had the opportunity to review all of those documents.
So the big stack.
Yes, large stack.
Are the materials that you reviewed and the interview procedures that you conducted with Ms. Wuornos the kinds of procedures that experts would normally rely upon in rendering an opinion?
That is correct.
And did you yourself conduct testing of Ms. Wuornos?
Yes, I did.
Did you conduct intelligence testing that taps into neuropsychological issues as well as personality testing?
That is correct, yes.
Are those sort of the 3 broad areas that psychologists deal with?
Yes.
And you indicated you reviewed the testing from the other experts.
Yes, I did.
Two other experts have testified prior to your taking the stand, and I guess the best way for me to start with you, Doctor, is to ask you, who is Lee Wuornos?
I think the best way to answer that, to respond to that question,
You
is
don't
that
need to object. We'll stipulate she's the defendant in this case.
I'll rephrase, Your Honor. Have you formulated any opinions from a mental health perspective regarding Aileen Wuornos?
yes, I have.
Have you reached a diagnosis of her?
Yes, I have.
In reaching the diagnosis or diagnoses, did you consider her background and history, her makeup, and her testing results?
Yes, I did. All of those factors were considered.
Can you tell us first what your diagnoses of her were, if any?
My diagnosis is that the defendant is suffering the effects of what we call a borderline personality disorder.
Were you able to formulate any opinions regarding any cerebral dysfunction issues in Ms. Wuornos' case?
As a result of my testing, I found signs of what we call organicity, which is what you have indicated. Yes.
And did you review testing from Drs. McMahon and Dr. Bordini considering that issue?
Yes, I did.
Talk to us a little bit about what aspects of Ms. Wuornos' history were valuable or relevant or significant to those two diagnoses, and start with the personality issues first, if you can.
I think the issues that were critical with respect to the diagnosis that I have indicated comes about summarily from looking at and categorizing her history from the time of birth up to the present time. What we basically have in terms of her psychosocial history is an existence that, in essence, from the very beginning was characterized by negatives, by adversity. What happens then is that you have a situation where individuals function in an environment that is characterized by a lack of nurturance, by a lack of support, by a lack of emotionality, which are critical ingredients if an individual is going to develop certain mechanisms that will be useful in terms of functioning in later life. We all are able to develop as individuals, we all are able to develop in terms of functioning as we do by virtue of the fact that we have had certain experiences. We are able to form certain control mechanisms, impulse control mechanisms. We're able to learn how to defer gratification, how to engage in long-range planning, how to use our apperceptive ability, that is to take lessons from the past and use them to project in terms of how we're going to behave in the present and future. All of these kinds of skills that many of us take for granted are skills that we are able to develop by virtue of the fact that we have been fortunate enough to grow up in a nurturing environment, a nurturing household, or in some way our environment has provided certain measures of caring and support for us. When an individual is unable or does not have access to that kind of nurturing, to that kind of emotional support, what you basically do is you set the stage for certain deficits that are by all means going to be manifested. And the deficits are going to be manifested in a variety of areas in terms of the inability to control impulse, poor planning skills, poor secondary thought processes, all of the kinds of control mechanisms that we consider to be acceptable and necessary for functioning in an organized society. Those mechanisms are not there through no fault of the individual, but by virtue of the fact that the individual, in this case Ms. Wuornos, has not had access to those things that many of us take for granted. So consequently, you get what we call the personality deficits that preclude one's functioning, behaving, or reacting in a normal and appropriate fashion. Those deficits do that. You see, when an individual is a child, it's different in terms of his or her reaction than if that individual is an adult. If we experience adversity as an adult, we can make some distinction between the fact that I am a human being and this is something that happened to me that is negative, and so I can overcome it. But you see, with children and adolescents, when they experience adverse circumstances and situations, they have not yet developed the mechanisms that allow them to separate themselves from their environment. So if their environment is negative, then the interpretation is, then I am negative, or there is something wrong with me, there is something bad about me. And so as a young person, a child, an adolescent, the individual, without some kind of significant and intensive intervention, is unable to overcome those deficits, and those deficits manifest themselves later on in life. And that's the situation that we have with the defendant, Aileen Wuornos. The situation in which she grew up was negative, it was non-supportive, it was non-nurturing. As a result, she was unable to develop any sense of identity, any sense of self-worth, any sense of belief in her own ability and capacity to function. And as a result, those deficits led to her inability to develop certain kinds of coping mechanisms and skills that are necessary to function in society.
Is there a genetic component as well, a biological component?
Yes, the research indicates that there is a genetic or biological component with respect to psychological functioning.
Would the deficits that Ms. Wuornos has be consistent with that research as far as the genetic component is concerned?
Yes, it would.
What do you know about her biological father?
Her biological father committed suicide at a particular point in his history while he was incarcerated. And I'm not sure of the charges. I believe one of the charges was sexual abuse, and there was another charge that I don't recall.
What about her biological mother? What do we know about her?
Her biological mother died from cirrhosis of the liver that may have been contributed to by alcoholism.
What, from your speaking with Ms. Wuornos and reviewing background materials, what can you tell us about her schooling years?
Her schooling years, based upon what I have indicated earlier in terms of the lack of nurturance or the lack of a nurturing environment, her schooling years were filled with a certain degree of turmoil. There was truancy, and functioning was average level or below average. And that could be expected given the likelihood of an individual, given that there will not be a likelihood of an individual being successful given trying to function from a negative environment.
Do you recall reports prepared by the school authorities regarding Ms. Wuornos?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Do you recall a report prepared on April 13, 1970? You may not recall the specific report, but do you recall the school authorities indicating that Ms. Wuornos was an individual in need of counseling?
Yes, that is correct.
Do you also recall the school reports indicating that Ms. Wuornos had been put on a mild tranquilizer in order to assist with her behavior?
Yes.
What does that say to a person with experience in adolescent psychology? What does it say to see school reports that indicate that a student needs therapy and that a student needs medication?
What that says and what that communicates and what that reveals is that you have an individual who is not a quote unquote bad individual, but you have an individual who is in need of help. All behavior is purposive. When we engage in certain kind of behavior, we don't do it just because. The behavior is a reaction. And when you find individuals, whether we're talking about Ms. Wuornos or another child or what have you, when you see individuals engaging in that kind of behavior, whether it's truancy or what have you, it is an indication that something is wrong. It is oftentimes a cry for help, and it is a cry for assistance. Something needs to be done, some intervention needs to be engaged in order to address the particular problem.
What aspects of the borderline personality disorder are most significant in Ms. Wuornos' case?
I think there are a couple of aspects of this particular diagnostic category that are most important. I mentioned one a little earlier, and that is the lack of self-concept or self-esteem that comes about as a result of the lack of a nurturing environment. But there are other aspects that come into play. As a result of that, you get an individual who, because of not having a stable sense of self, really does not have the framework in order to shape attitudes, emotions, thoughts, ideas, and what have you. So as a result, planning, as a result, weighing of consequences and the like, that ability is going to be impaired. Also, given that particular orientation, you'll have an individual who basically will constantly seek to ingratiate himself or herself to other individuals in order to try to compensate for the deficits in self-esteem. I am not worthwhile. My history and people around me have said to me, you're not worthwhile. So what I try to do as I grow and develop is I try to ingratiate myself with other individuals. In essence, I'm saying to other people, please like me, please accept me. And as a result, the individual is unable to make appropriate decisions, to respond appropriately, because the individual is in essence functioning and is in essence motivated by his or her deficiencies. So the individual is not able to make independent decisions. As a result, I think it's fairly clear that what happens as part of this is that there is a tremendous amount of anxiety and confusion that comes into play. Because on the one hand, the individual desperately is seeking acceptance, nurturance, closeness, because the individual has never had it. On the other hand, the individual is saying, I'm not really worth the nurturance and the caring that I'm so desperately seeking. And so it creates a basic conflict. It creates a basic edge of tension in terms of how the individual functions. And as a result, there is a tremendous amount of anger. There is a tremendous amount of unresolved emotionality as a result of that conflict. Also, with relation to this particular disorder we're discussing, is the fact that an individual suffering from this disorder is conditioned to a state of what we call hypervigilance, which means that the person is constantly on alert. Why? Because the person's experiences and contact with other people have said to that particular person, you cannot trust us. People cannot be trusted. The world is not a nice place. The world is not a nurturing place. So as a result, the person has to be constantly on guard because people and the world cannot be trusted. As a result, the individual is going to be very sensitive to anything, any kind of action that would remind her of any kind of past assaults or affronts. And we're talking about feelings with respect to abandonment, feelings with respect to desertion, feelings with respect to betrayal. So any kind of behavior that is suggestive of those past difficulties and abuses will bring about and create basically a break in control, because there is a tremendous amount of underlying anxiety, anger as a result of the deficits, and because of the situation that we have described. Whenever anything comes to the fore, whether it be real or not, the individual only has to perceive that there is a threat, that there is something that reminds her of a past abuse or a past betrayal, and the behavior breaks down and is even less under conscious control than under ordinary circumstances.
You indicated that these individuals want approval from others.
That is correct.
In Ms. Wuornos' case, and as I understand it in the cases of other individuals suffering from a borderline personality disorder, their actions are often inconsistent with that desire, are they not?
That's correct. Their actions are inconsistent because of the conflict that we alluded to earlier. On the one hand, the person is desperately in need of affection and caring and concern and closeness. But at the same time, the person is also saying to herself, I don't deserve it, because my history and people that I have known have told me all my life, from as far back as I can remember, that I don't deserve it. And as a result, you get the kind of conflict that I've alluded to. At the same time, what you get are two basic patterns of reaction. On the one hand, when the individual is in the situation and is seeking the nurturance and is seeking the caring and the concern, what happens oftentimes is that if the individual has certain feelings, certain ideas, certain beliefs, they won't express them. Why? Because they are constantly hypervigilant. They are constantly fearful of being abandoned, of being deserted. They are constantly fearful of experiencing some of the same kinds of things that they have experienced earlier. And as a result, when that occurs, and you get the underlying anxiety that we have alluded to earlier, individuals may often, because of that conflict and the break in control, engage in behavior that is self-destructive, or may engage in behavior where they strike out against others.
The name of what such a person is carries the word disorder with it.
Correct.
Is such a person impaired?
Yes, that person is impaired.
Is such a person disturbed?
That is correct, yes.
Is such a person the type of person who gets hospitalized?
That is correct, yes.
Is such a person the type of person who would qualify for disability assistance?
In my opinion, yes, because functioning under ordinary circumstances would be impaired, yes.
As compared to ordinary individuals?
That is correct, yes.
Is such a person the type of person that is often given medication at hospitals?
Yes, medication is a form of treatment, is a part of the treatment regimen in many cases.
As I understand it, in the precursor to the DSM-3R, the DSM-3, and then before that in the DSM-1 and DSM-2, there was no borderline personality disorder category in the DSMs 1 and 2.
That's correct, yes.
At that time, somebody such as Lee Wuornos would be classified as what? Schizophrenic, schizoid?
Schizoid, schizotypal behavior. There are a number of categories, yes.
And at such time, would such individuals, again, be hospitalized and receive treatment?
That is correct, yes.
A person such as Lee Wuornos, who mental health practitioners were looking at in the 1930s, for example, would they recognize that something is wrong with her?
I believe they would recognize that something is wrong, yes.
You also spoke to the issue of organicity.
Yes.
What does that mean?
When we talk about organicity, we're really talking about some type of cerebral impairment. Oftentimes it's referred to as brain damage or what have you, but the idea is that the individual has suffered some type of organic trauma that interferes with or that impairs his or her ability to function in a variety of areas.
Is that consistent with a cortical dysfunction?
I'm sorry, would you?
Is that consistent with a cortical dysfunction?
Yes, it's often referred to as that, yes.
It's just the name the professionals use for that.
That's correct, yes.
Does that affect one's ability to conceptualize, to use concepts and reasoning?
That's one of the areas of deficit that you often find in terms of how one processes information. And that area of functioning would be affected by by organicity or some kind of head trauma.
Would there be an interplay between an organic problem and a personality problem, such as a
definitely.
personality disorder?
Definitely, by all means. You would find impairment, if you look just at organic impairment, you would find certain cognitive processing deficits being manifested. And then if you look at it in relation to the personality disorder, you will find that there would be an exacerbation of the difficulties. Also, by the same token, if you're looking at an individual suffering the effects of a borderline personality disorder, and then superimposed you have additionally organicity or some type of cortical dysfunction, you're just going to get, in essence, problems and difficulties and impairment in functioning that is even more so than we would consider given just one or the other.
You indicate that the disorder has a connection to the dysfunctional family,
That's correct, yes.
and that the family in this case was dysfunctional.
That is correct.
In what sense?
When we talk about dysfunctional family, what we're talking about is a process wherein the family unit, which is basically the core nurturing unit in our society, is unable to provide the basic kinds of skills, the necessities, both emotional, physical, and otherwise, that an individual needs in order to be able to function appropriately. And when that is not done, there are long-standing deficits that individuals experience, and those deficits impair one's ability to function in society as individuals ordinarily would.
Are these deficiencies long-standing in Ms. Wuornos' case?
They definitely are. They are long-standing as borne out in reports from a variety of sources that you've alluded to earlier.
Are these deficiencies that were with her at the time she was with Mr. Mallory?
Oh, by all means, I believe so, yes.
She suffered from these disorders and
That is correct, yes.
I didn't hear that.
suffered from these disorders and among the mitigating issues in a capital case was the question of whether at the time of an offense an individual's capacity to conform his or her conduct to the requirements of the law was substantially impaired.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that mitigating factor?
Yes, I am.
To a reasonable degree of psychological certainty, were you able to formulate an opinion as to the applicability of that factor to Ms. Wuornos' case?
Yes, I was.
Can you tell us what that opinion is?
My opinion is that she was unable to.
Another mitigating issue in a capital case is whether at the time of the offense, the individual's capacity to appreciate the nature and quality of their conduct was substantially impaired.
Yes, I'm aware of that one also.
And there's another one that
I'm sorry, I missed this last question.
was substantially impaired.
Wasn't that the first one?
It's two parts of the first one. It's another aspect.
I apologize, I just didn't hear it. May the court reporter read it back, Your Honor? I apologize.
Okay. Question, another mitigating issue in a capital case is whether at the time of the offense, an individual's capacity to appreciate the nature and quality of their conduct was substantially impaired.
Thank you.
And another one relates to whether the individual in a capital offense suffered from an extreme mental or emotional disturbance at the time of the offense.
Yes, I'm aware of that one also.
Were you able to formulate opinions as to those factors?
Yes, I was.
And what were those opinions?
My opinion is that Ms. Wuornos was suffering the effects of the aforementioned borderline personality disorder that we have discussed.
Would those factors be applicable from the mental health perspective in Ms. Wuornos' case?
Yes.
The law also recognizes something called non-statutory mitigating factors. Are you aware of those?
Yes, I am.
Those are factors that are just...
Objection, Your Honor.
Yes, just one at a time.
I withdraw.
Mr. Danner?
We'd like to hear the rest of the question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Those are factors that are not specifically listed, but also affect the makeup of the individual.
Yes, that is correct.
And in Ms. Wuornos' case, are there such factors?
I believe there are, yes.
Can you tell us what some of those are?
I believe that some of those factors would include some of the things that we have discussed previously. I think the lack of nurturance in the environment, the attempt to function dysfunctional family unit, the adversity of situational variables in which she was reared. There is also evidence of drug abuse and the use of toxic substances. I think all of those would be factors that would be addressed under that particular category.
How about her history of alcohol abuse?
Yes, that's when I mentioned drugs, I was considering alcohol in that category.
And her borderline personality disorder and organicity, those also would affect her behavior and who she is.
That is correct.
The impairments from which, John, one of the aspects of the impairments that you discussed is sort of an inability to connect with other people.
Yes.
Yet at the same time, this is an individual who is hitchhiking and meeting strangers and surviving that way.
Yes.
How do you square those two things?
I think that when we talk about interpersonal relationships, we're talking about the ability to establish quality relationships with individuals. And that ability was impaired. The fact that she was hitchhiking is not necessarily an indicator of the establishment of what we call genuine interpersonal relationships. But her history demonstrates an inability over numerous occasions and instances, an inability in that particular arena in terms of establishing interpersonal relationships. In fact, looking at that particular aspect of behavior, there are examples wherein when those interpersonal relationships did not grow to fruition or did not continue, a certain amount of stress was engendered, and that break of control that we alluded to earlier manifested itself.
Has she attempted suicide?
Yes, she has.
Is that consistent with individuals suffering from this disorder?
That is correct.
Why?
It is consistent because under situations, because of a lack of coping mechanisms that we have discussed earlier, and a lack of adaptive mechanisms, the individual is unable to bring to bear rational, cognitive thinking processes on a particular situation. And given the attendant stress, the behavior and the control mechanisms break down. And as I indicated earlier, there are two dimensions of behavior. One can be internal, the other can be external. In this particular instance, the break-in control was internal, and the aggression and the underlying anger and hostility was directed towards herself in the form of a suicidal attempt.
And the stress and other perceptions that these individuals have, are they sometimes not in tune with what's going on out there?
Exactly. You see, the reality, in terms of what is really going on, is not really the crucial factor. The crucial factor is what the individual perceives, and that is what we're talking about here. We're talking about looking at the world through the eyes of Ms. Wuornos. So it's not what exists in terms of our view of reality, it's what the person perceives as existing. And if the person perceives threat, if the person perceives harm, if the person perceives abandonment, desertion, abuse, or what have you, you're going to have a break in control. Why? Because the person does not have the mechanisms, the control mechanisms, the secondary thought processes that we have alluded to as a result of those adverse factors and experiences that we have been talking about.
You indicated that you provided testing to Ms. Wuornos.
Yes, I did.
In one of the tests, I was going through it the other day, I think it's the MMPI, she left out some answers. Are you aware of that?
Yes, you did.
Did that affect the test itself?
No, not really, no.
And was that test consistent with your findings regarding Ms. Wuornos?
The findings in that particular test were consistent with the other findings which led to the conclusions that we have been discussing today.
I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you, Doctor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jordan.
Good afternoon.
Would you consider that question a form of manipulation?
What question?
Good afternoon.
What's not a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, addressing you.
Oh, just the address.
Okay, yes.
I would not give it a great deal of thought as to whether it represented manipulation or not. I would give you the benefit of the doubt that you are exchanging social amenities and take it from there.
With regard to what you described in Ms. Wuornos, the vast majority of your opinion is based on her self-reporting. Is that not true? In other words, her stories.
No, that's not true.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Did she tell you and what day did you interview her, please?
The first occasion was October 16th of 91. The second occasion was December 19th of 91.
All right, and on the October 16th, 91, did she tell you how she killed Mr. Malcolm?
No, she did not.
Did you ask her?
No, I did not.
Did you know she was charged with killing Mr. Malcolm?
Yes, I did. I was aware of the charges, yes.
Did she tell you that Mr. Mallory had raped her anally and tied her up to a steering wheel and squirted alcohol in her nose and all that?
No, she did not tell me that.
Were you appointed as a confidential expert?
Yes, I was.
How about on December the 19th, 91? Did she tell you that Mr. Mallory raped her?
No, she did not.
Did you ever ask her any of the facts of how the killing of Richard Mallory came about?
No, we did not discuss the facts of how the killing of Mr. Mallory came about.
Never at all?
No.
You didn't think that was important to your diagnosis?
No.
You psychologists all do it a little differently, don't you? Everyone has their own method.
I believe so. I believe you'll find that psychologists will go about the process of conducting evaluations slightly differently, but the overall process will be in essence the same or similar.
But you didn't think it was important to hear from her the details of the killing, right?
No.
With regard to her self-reporting of her family situation, did you talk to her the girl that actually lived in a sister relationship with her, Lori Grody, about their home and what went on in the home?
No, I did not, but I did review a statement provided by that individual.
All right, Lori Grody, in her statement, said they had a comfortable home, a stable household, and the father was protective, didn't she?
Yes.
And that Ms. Wuornos had been cared for by the father, who was actually the grandfather, after her mother had abandoned her.
Yes, that's a part of what she said.
Okay, and that she had received medical care in the family.
Yes. And she also indicated that as part of her experience, that Ms. Wuornos appeared to be disliked by individuals in her environment who sometimes went out of their way to heap abuse on her.
All right, I was asking you about the family.
Oh, I'm considering that family.
I'll tell you what, you can add a lot of things after I ask you a question. Let me ask you a question first. With regard to the sister, Dorothy called her sister, she was really an aunt, but they began to live together when they were very young. The grandfather served as Eileen's father.
That's correct.
The grandmother served as the mother.
That's correct.
And the two young aunt and uncles who lived in the house really were like brothers and sisters more than uncles and aunts.
Well, in terms of the makeup of the household, you could say.
And as far as age differential, we used to think of an aunt, your aunt was someone older and
Yeah,
wise.
there was not the usual age differential.
The two girls apparently played in the fire together a few times, or at least one time.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And the sister aunt went on to say that, in fact, Aileen had a defiant attitude toward the parents, didn't she?
I don't recall the use of that word.
Okay. And that, in fact, that Aileen Wuornos was not improperly punished or disciplined by the father.
I don't recall offhand in that particular statement.
All right. And Lori Grody went on to say that around the age of 11 or 12, Aileen became rebellious. You certainly remember that, don't you? Manipulative of the parents.
I believe seeing that statement, yes.
And that Aileen had developed a quick temper and kind of a threatening personality there, even as a youngster in her early teens.
I remember seeing something with respect to temper, but that's what I recall specifically.
And with regard to discipline, the usual discipline was either grounding or spanking when they were younger, right?
I remember that statement, yes.
Okay. And really no excessive discipline, nothing to be alarmed.
I recall that from the statement, yes.
And no report of sexual abuse of Aileen Wuornos by the father.
I believe that was what the statement indicated, yes.
And the kids were treated pretty even-handedly. Weren't any favorites type thing.
I understand that was her perception that was included in the statement, yes.
Did find out that the grandfather kind of drank after work when he came home, apparently most nights, drank regularly.
I don't recall, the specification of drinking after work, but that he drank, yes.
But that he was not a violent or abusive father.
That was her perception, yes.
With regard to what you call, I think, is cerebral dysfunction.
Cerebral dysfunction, cortical dysfunction, organicity, head trauma, brain damage.
Okay. She doesn't suffer that to the degree that a neurologist, an actual medical doctor, could do a CAT scan and pick out that, does she?
It may not show up on a CAT scan or type of neurological exam. No.
In fact, her level of dysfunction is no greater than many people who operate successfully in society, correct?
I don't know if it's no greater than anyone who operates successfully in society.
Why do you mean anyone? I meant others. There are people with greater mental deficits that manage to go to work and live a relatively normal life.
I think usually you'll find that's been because there's been some intervention in order to bring that about.
How long has Aileen Wuornos been a borderline personality?
I can't give you a specific number of years, but the the symptomatology goes back early on. She first began demonstrating or manifesting symptomatology around age 10 or 11. And it would not surprise me if there were not other cues earlier, one of which we have already alluded to in terms of truancy and school difficulties.
Okay.
But we're talking about a deficit of personality disorder that is of long standing. In fact, that's one of the criteria for it.
But you found some history, she was a truant before she was 15, wasn't she?
Yes, she was truant, yes.
Set fires before she was 15.
I saw an instance where there was one fire that was involved, where she was involved with others.
Weren't there two? She and her sister, Ann, set a field on fire and she got burned a little bit.
I'm sorry, I'm only aware of one.
Okay. You remember that one?
Yes,
How about the one in the girls' bathroom at school when she was in 7th or 8th grade?
I'm not aware of that one.
You read Lori Brody's statement. You just don't remember everything in it, right?
I don't recall that.
With regard to the facts of this case, would the facts of how the killing of Mr. Mallory occurred make any difference at all in your diagnosis?
I am aware of Ms. Wuornos' version of how the killing occurred.
Which version?
The version that you alluded to earlier, in terms of Mr. Mallory's actions that you described.
The current version,
The version that you described.
the tie-up alcohol
Yes, that's
rape
correct.
version?
Yes.
Were you aware of an earlier version where she didn't say she was raped at all or even an attempt to rape?
No, I'm not.
Were you aware of a version where she said the problem was she was afraid he was going to take the money away from her and that's why she got mad?
No, I'm not.
Were you aware of a version where she said that he wouldn't unzip his pants and that's why she got angry and they struggled about that and she got out and shot him?
No, I'm not.
If those were the facts, as opposed to her being raped and alcohol squirted up her and things like that, would you still have the same diagnosis?
In terms of the borderline personality disorder, yes, she suffers the effects of a borderline personality disorder.
Sure.
That's been a lifelong and a long-standing disorder, not just one that was recently diagnosed.
And it wouldn't make any difference what the circumstances were under which she killed Mr. Mallory, would it?
No, I can't say that it wouldn't make any difference. What I'm saying to you is that she suffers the effects of a borderline personality disorder, and it is a disorder of long standing.
You said that a moment ago. What I'm asking you is if, in fact, there was not a rape and a tie-up and alcohol up the nose event, but very simply she got mad at him because he wouldn't unzip his pants, you would still say she had a borderline personality disorder, right?
That's what I just indicated. It's a long-standing disorder, yes.
And in fact, if she had not had any attempt at sex at all, if she just simply decided to rob him and kill him, you would still say she had a borderline personality disorder, right?
And if I would still say she had a borderline personality disorder, what I'm saying to you is that my diagnosis is that she suffers the effects of a borderline personality disorder. That disorder is one of long standing.
You said that, doctor. What I'm asking you is this.
Objection to the argumentative nature, Your Honor.
Yes, question.
And what I'm asking you is this. It wouldn't make any difference if all that happened, and I use that in kind of vernacular, is that if all that happened was that they pulled into the woods and then she started shooting with no provocation, that she was going to rob him, kill him, take his property, she would still be diagnosed by you as having a borderline personality disorder.
That is correct, yes.
That wouldn't change your diagnosis at all.
No, that is correct.
Wouldn't change the reason for the killing.
That she would still be diagnosed as suffering the effects of a borderline personality disorder.
She does, in fact, know right from wrong, doesn't she?
And I spoke with her on those two occasions, and she does at this time, yes.
And she is capable of conforming to lawful conduct and understanding the consequences of her act.
Based upon the times that I saw her at that time, she was.
Is there any reason that you did not diagnose her as recognized under DSM-3R as an antisocial personality?
Yes,
What would that be?
there are a number of very significant reasons. One reason is that you're talking about an antisocial personality disorder. And that particular disorder, one of the oftentimes individuals refer to someone suffering from an antisocial personality disorder as being a person without conscience. And that does not describe Ms. Wuornos. As part of my evaluation, she manifested remorse. So that would not apply. As I look at her history is not consistent with that of someone suffering the effects of an antisocial personality disorder. What you find with an antisocial personality disorder is a certain constancy in terms of their behavior. Their violation of societal norms and the norms of other individuals is a constant. It continues over time, and if you observe their behavior, that is a constant with them. If you look at the history of Ms. Wuornos, what you find is that the inappropriate behavior is not a constant. If you look at her history very carefully, you'll notice that there are gaps. And when I say gaps, I'm referring to the fact that there are periods of time where she made conscious efforts to be a productive citizen, to work, to earn a living, to start a business. But because of the aforementioned deficits that we have alluded to, as a result of her early years and what have you, she was unable to maintain that particular posture. But what that says is that in spite of the existence of the personality disorder, here was an individual where there was ego strength trying to manifest itself, saying, I'm worthwhile, I can do something. But because of the long range and long standing deficits, she was unable to. You don't find that with someone suffering the effects of an antisocial personality disorder. So those are two major reasons why there would be a differential diagnosis.
Could you break that down into maybe two sentences? One, you said she exhibited conscience and remorse.
Remorse, yeah.
That's one.
Conscience, yes.
And what's the other?
And the second is that when you look at her history is not consistent with that of an individual suffering the effects of an antisocial personality disorder.
All right. Are you aware that she said it was all right she killed these men because they're of an age that they didn't have parents and no family, so it really didn't matter?
No.
That would be indicative of not having a conscience, wouldn't it?
It may be.
Well, what would you call it?
That was not you're telling me something and I'm saying to you that I was not aware of that based upon my evaluation of her.
Did you read the typed statement that she gave to the police?
I read a statement that of her statement. I read a copy of the statement based upon the tape that was given as part of her arrest.
And in that statement, you don't recall her saying because of the age of the men and they didn't have families, it didn't make much sense?
I don't recall that, no.
Okay, you're not denying she said it.
I can't deny it. I'm saying to you I don't recall that, no.
And are you also aware that she also made the statement to another person that it was okay that these men deserved to die because they were cheating on their families? She was a prostitute?
I'm not aware of that.
But if you said that, that would be indicative of no remorse, wouldn't it?
In that particular instance, yes.
What about the fact, let's go hypothetically for a moment, because you don't know any of the facts of any killings, do you?
I know the facts based upon the documents that I've been provided.
Okay, you're aware that she told numerous stories with regard to each killing?
Yes. I don't know about with regard to each killing with respect to Mr. Mallory.
Okay. All right, but you're not aware that she told remarkably and markedly different stories if she went along with regard to each killing, changing her stories all along?
My main concern was with the case that is the subject at hand
Are
here.
you saying you're not aware of it then?
No, I'm not.
Would that make a difference?
The fact that there were different stories?
Yeah, that she's telling a lot of different stories each time, kind of improving on why she killed those people?
No, I would not. It would not surprise me.
You'd have the same diagnosis.
The doctor can answer him.
Oh, I thought he had. He said it wouldn't surprise
It
you.
would not surprise me by virtue of what I have discussed with respect to this particular personality disorder and how it manifests itself. That would not be surprising.
Right. So lying and changing stories would be consistent with his personality disorder.
Lying and changing stories is your characterization of that. I choose to see it as an individual whose cognitive processes are not functioning appropriately, and an individual whose behavior, i.e. recall, reporting facilities, etc., breaks down under stress. If you were talking about someone who was not suffering the effects of a borderline personality disorder, I might tend to agree with you. But knowing how behavior breaks down under stress, knowing the lack of skill in terms of adapting and coping, I would not agree with that.
In other words, because she has borderline personality disorder, if she changes her story, it's not a lie.
What I'm saying in response to that is what I have just said. Given the particular characteristics of the borderline personality disorder and what we have talked about with regard to its characteristics and the organicity, it is not surprising to find that there would be variations in stories or accounts that were provided with respect to what has transpired. I would not call it lying because when I think of lying, I'm thinking of some preconceived plan. I see it as another manifestation of this personality disorder.
Okay. Are you saying that a person with personality disorder can't lie?
I think I've answered the question.
No, I've asked you a different question. Are you saying a person with a personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, can't lie?
I'm saying that a person who is suffering the effects of a borderline personality disorder will exhibit behavior such as that we have been talking about. And that what you consider to be a lie, I consider to be a manifestation of the personality disorder.
All right, but let me ask you this. With regard to the shooting of Mr. Carskadden,
I'm sorry?
Mr. Carskadden, for example,
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the hearing, Your Honor.
this goes to the credibility of the witness.
Not relevant, Your Honor.
That can overrule. Go ahead. With regard to yes, with regard to the shooting of one of the victims, Mr. Carskadden, the first story she told was that she shot him in the back seat of the car. After she shot him several times, she got out and learned for the first time, didn't know it before, that he had a pistol because it was laying on the hood. And then she got mad and reloaded the gun and went in and shot him some more. Then she ultimately told Dr. McMahon that they began to get ready to have sex in the woods, and she saw him take a gun and put it between the front and the back part of the back seat. Shoved it in there up next to himself, and she was nervous because he had this gun. And she said, "Are you going to rob me?" And he said some innocuous response, and with that, she grabbed the gun and she shot him over and over again because she's afraid he was going to get her. And she killed him. And she was so mad, she shot him some more. And then the next time she talked to Dr. McMahon about it, months later, she said that she was there and they're getting ready to have sex, and he came out and he had the gun stuck in the belt of his clothes, and he whipped it out and he put it in her mouth and he cocked the hammers and he made her have oral sex with him, and then he clicked the hammer against her head and scared her, and she flopped to the ground and shook in fright, and that she thought she was going to be murdered. And then he got in the back seat and put the gun down and she managed to get her gun and shoot him to death. Those are each remarkably, totally different stories.
Objection, Your Honor. It's argument. It's
No.
not a question.
I'll ask the question.
Compound question.
I'm sorry.
Motion for mistrial.
Do you, don't you find those to be remarkably, totally different stories with the details of how that murder was supposed to have occurred according to her?
Objection, Your Honor. That case is not an issue here, to use another.
If your question is, do I find the stories different? Yes, I do.
And would that not be indicia of the fact that she is not telling the truth with regard to at least 2, if not 3 of those stories or more?
I can't answer that.
No, you can't, can you?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
Okay. You can't tell this jury whether or not that's an indication that she's not telling the truth, at least in one of the stories?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative.
It may or may not be indicative of the fact that she is telling the truth. My point to you is that given the effects of the borderline personality disorder that I have described to you, variations in stories or accounts or descriptions of what has taken place, that kind of variation is consistent with the existence of that personality disorder.
But not indication of lying.
Whether it's it may or may not be, but it is not inconsistent with the disorder that we are discussing.
With regard to the tests that she gave, could you give me a list of the tests you gave her?
I administered the Bender installed designs, the revised beta examination, the Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory, and the Carlson psychological survey.
I'd like you to look at the exhibit 6 times D and E, 7 times D and E, and ask you if these are true copies of the tests that you furnished to me.
It looks as if they are. Yes, that is correct. Yes, they are.
And it was upon these tests that you have based your opinion, plus the interview.
Yes, and the evaluation or assessment of the documents and what have you.
Your Honor, with all the tests and the evidence.
Objection to use of the test, Your Honor. No objection to any questions about the test.
With regard to the personality, well, yes, let me ask you a question. With regard to 7 times D, basically, these are picture tests. This beta 2,
That's the revised beta examination, yes.
and kind of get out of the maze type tests.
Yes, that particular test is yes.
And Bender Gestalt, what does that take?
The Bender Gestalt assesses functioning across several levels. One, as we've talked about, it reflects or serves as an indicator of organicity or brain damage.
May I ask you this? Is that the whole test?
That's the whole test, yes.
Is that
There are
one?
8.
That's it?
That's it, yes.
One page of
That's your answer, Your Honor.
one page of squiggly lines?
That may be your interpretation, but it's more than one page of squiggly lines, and it has research dating back to the 1940s that has been on a regular basis renormed and updated with respect to validity.
I would again offer the test, Your Honor, so the jury can look at what kind of test he's giving. He's based his opinion upon it.
Your Honor, argumentative, move from Mr. Mayor.
Sustain the objection, submission of the test.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This college, but
With regard to this borderline personality disorder, it's pretty common, isn't it?
Common? I don't know how common it is. No.
Would you call it common?
I've never really thought about it in terms of whether it's common or not.
Okay, could you think about it? When you get an answer, let me know.
Sure. When I get an answer, I'll let you know.
Okay. You don't know whether it's common or not?
No, I have not thought about it in that sense, as to whether it's common or uncommon.
Well, could you give us an answer now whether you believe it's common or not?
I can give you an answer in terms of my experience.
All right.
I don't find it to necessarily be that common.
You know it's considered by the DSM-3R as being common.
I think you have to be very careful in making that kind of assertion with respect to the DSM-3R.
Well, the word's this: prevalence is the subtitle. It says borderline personality disorder is apparently common. What other interpretation should I
Would you read
put
on?
Sir?
Would you read on?
Yes, it goes on predisposing factors and familial patterns, no information.
Okay. Is there any specification with regard to gender?
I'm sorry?
Is there any specification with regard to gender?
No.
With regard to
Looks like
age?
men and women both have it.
Both have it. But does that say anything about how common it is with respect to male or female gender?
Do you disagree with the DSM-3R?
Objection, Your Honor, that's a misleading question in the context in which it's read.
Those weren't my words. I read the DSM-3R.
My answer to you is that based upon my experience, I do not find it to be that common.
What about the antisocial personalities? Is that more common or less common?
I'm not sure.
Do you know what the DSM-3R says about it?
I'm not sure. I don't really pay a lot of attention as to whether something is common. That really has no bearing whatsoever in terms of my work or my diagnosis.
You don't know what the DSM-3R says about prevalence with regard to the antisocial personality?
No.
Would you have any reason to disagree if the opinion expressed in DSM-3R is that for American females, less than 1% would have the antisocial personality?
Mr. Tanner, I'm not disagreeing with the DSM-3R. I'm simply responding to your question based upon my own experience. And my experience, in terms of the particular
You said it wasn't
manifestation may not be the same as the people who put that together. So I'm not disputing that. I'm simply trying to respond to you from my own experience.
You relied upon the DSM-3R in reaching your conclusions, correct?
I didn't rely upon it in terms of reaching my conclusions. It is the particular diagnosis is one of the many diagnoses contained in the DSM-3R.
All right. They gave you some criteria in DSM-3R, did they not, with regard to antisocial personality?
I think they give criteria for most of the diagnostic categories that they provide.
And did you not find that Ms. Wuornos met all of the criteria in criteria A, C, and D? Of course, enough of the criteria A, C, and D to qualify for antisocial personality?
In my opinion, she did not.
No. I'm asking if she met the criteria with regard to A, C, and D. There are four major categories.
Are we talking, what particular category are we talking about? Diagnostic category?
Antisocial personality disorder.
Okay.
And she met 3 of the 4 easily, did she not?
Oh, I don't know if she met them easily. If you're trying to ask if there's some similarity between the two.
Well, did she meet any of them easily?
Easily for the antisocial personality disorder?
Yes.
There is some overlap in terms of the characteristics for both, yes. The thing you have to be very careful about, Mr. Tanner, is that if you look at each of those categories in the DSM-3R, the DSM-3R, first of all, is a cookbook, and it indicates after each diagnostic category or each diagnostic grouping that there's also a section that deals with differential diagnosis. So you have to be very careful in using that because that is meant to be used by individuals with some clinical skill. So it's not just that you go in and you do a matching job where yes, one here, one there. Because there is a differential category with respect to diagnosis for each particular category. And so while there may be some similarity in terms of presenting symptomatology, it does not necessarily mean that it necessarily relates to that particular diagnosis.
I need just a moment. Thank you.
Well, let me just hit two of the categories real quickly. One of them, she was over the age of 18, wasn't she, when you interviewed her?
Yes, she was.
Okay, so that's one out of the four she made.
Yes, she was over the age of 18 when I interviewed her.
And before the age of 15, she was often a truant, right?
That is correct.
And she'd run away from home overnight at least twice.
That is correct.
And she often initiated fights as a child.
I'm not sure about her having initiated fights.
Okay. Well, she deliberately engaged in fire setting.
I don't know that she deliberately did engage in fire setting.
But her sister said she did.
I believe my recollection of that is that there were a number of individuals who were playing fire.
You don't recall her sister's statement that I'm sure you read that she set the fire in the girl. She, Aileen, set the fire in the girls' bathroom when she was in 7th, 8th, or 9th grade.
I've indicated I don't recall that. You had asked me about that earlier.
She was not suffering from hallucinations, was she?
When?
Well, do you have any evidence she's suffering from hallucinations? Hallucinations.
Well, in the statement that you have been alluding to by Lori, what's the pronunciation of the last name?
Lori Grody's the one
Lori
that
Grody.
it was her sister that saw her set the fire in the bathroom and in the feet.
Objection, Your Honor. If the doctor could answer the last question, Your Honor.
In the statement that was given by Lori Grody, I recall her citing an incident where one night she was at home and Ms. Wuornos called her on the phone and went through a series of statements telling her that she saw the Lord in her room and at the foot of her bed.
Saw the Lord?
Yes.
Well, why would you say that's a hallucination?
Objection, Your Honor. That's misleading. That's how the
No,
witness
it's not.
described it.
Let him
Yes, it
answer the
is.
question.
Answer the question.
That was a description of the perception of Ms. Grody. And her perception was that that was an indication of the abnormal behavior, inappropriate behavior of Ms. Wuornos.
Okay, so now you're taking Ms. Brody as a consultant or something.
Objection, Your Honor.
Is that what that's based upon?
You asked a particular question.
No, what I asked you was, did you have any evidence she's suffering from hallucinations?
And I just cited a statement from Ms. Grody.
Well, do you remember when I asked you whether you had seen any evidence of her hallucinating? Any evidence of her suffering hallucinations? Your answer was no?
No, I have not personally witnessed Ms. Wuornos hallucinating.
But Ms. Brody said she saw the Lord by the bed, so therefore you interpret that as maybe a hallucination.
I'm giving you that as an example of, you mentioned hallucinations. That is what Ms. Grody described as part of her statement.
What I asked you was, did you have any evidence that she was suffering
And
from
I answered that.
hallucinations?
I answered that. I have not witnessed, that's correct. I have not witnessed Ms. Wuornos experiencing hallucinations.
You have
No.
any evidence she's suffering from hallucinations other than what you just said?
No, I do not.
Okay. And what about delusions?
I'm sorry, what was the last word?
Well, when I asked you this question, let me just ask you, and ask if your answer is different. We took your deposition January the 25th. That was just 4 days ago.
That's correct.
And I asked you, I'm not asking you if she hallucinated as, on page 55, line 13, I'm not asking you if she hallucinated as a result of being in contact with you. I'm asking you if you have any evidence of her having hallucinations. Your answer was no. I had no evidence of her having had hallucinations. That was your answer, wasn't it?
That's correct, yes.
And then with regard to delusions, you said you had no evidence that she had suffered from delusions, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Colonel, I don't know if you can impeach when the answer is consistent, it's just been given.
Well, the first one wasn't consistent. I assume the second would be.
I thought the answer to the second one was.
That was my knowledge at the time, yes.
With regard to the ultimate bottom line mental diagnosis, this woman knows right from wrong, doesn't she?
Based upon the contact that I've had with her, yes, she does know right from wrong now, yes.
And she's not criminally insane.
Based upon my evaluation, no, she is not.
She understands the consequences of her acts,
Yes, she does.
and she's responsible for her conduct.
At this particular time, with respect to the existence of that particular disorder, you would have to be more specific than to make a broad generalization such as she is responsible for her conduct.
Are you saying that people who suffer from borderline personalities aren't responsible for the conduct?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have to be more specific than simply saying responsible for your conduct, because that can mean everything and nothing.
No question, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Carlos?
Yes, John. Doctor, you can get sort of can spin everywhere when you use the DSM-3R. This book is a book regarding disorders.
That is correct, yes.
The people it talks about are people who are disordered,
That is correct.
who are impaired,
That's correct.
who are deficient,
That is correct.
who are disturbed,
That's correct.
who are mentally ill.
All of those, yes.
And when the word common is used in the DSM-3R, they're talking about a common trait among people who are disturbed
That's correct.
and impaired.
Exactly. Based
And mentally
upon-
ill.
Yes.
When you were talking about Lori Grody's statement, and you heard some objections and some interaction between myself and Mr. Tanner.
Yes.
Ms. Grody was asked by a detective, did you ever know Aileen to have any hallucinations? Do you recall that?
Yes.
Page 35. And she said, Lori now, one time she called me from a motel somewhere, and I don't remember the year, I don't remember the motel, saying that she saw the Lord at the foot of her bed, a white light that she believed to be the Lord. That was Lori's answer.
That's correct, yes.
When you were talking to Mr. Tanner, were you telling him that you yourself have evidence of Ms. Wuornos hallucinating?
No, I was indicating to him that particular piece of information from Ms. Grody's statement.
Lori said she perceived that. She answered that to the hallucination.
That is correct, yes.
Lori said a bunch of other things Mr. Tanner didn't ask you about in her statement.
That is correct.
Lori said other things.
Yes, she did.
She said that she was going to commit her sister to a hospital. Did she not in her statement?
Yes, she did.
She said that she spoke to her brother about committing her sister. Isn't that
Yes, I
correct?
believe she said that she had spoken with her brother regarding committing her to a hospital.
And that was because of her sister's behavior, right?
That is correct.
Lori also said in the statement that Lori also discussed mood swings that Lee had.
That's one of the issues that she raised, one of the concerns that she had, the wide mood swings and changes in behavior.
Lori also discussed the fact that Lee tried to commit suicide on 3 separate occasions.
Yes.
Discussed the fact that Lee tried to commit suicide by overdosing on pills.
That's correct. She indicated that she, at that time, appeared to be using what she described as downers and reds.
She also described the fact that Lee always suffered from feelings of persecution in her statement.
That's correct, yes.
She also discussed the fact that Lee was different than other people.
That is correct, yes.
She discussed her father's drinking and the fact that he was an alcoholic.
That is correct, yes.
She discussed Lee's grandmother's drinking.
That is correct.
She also said she does that, referring to Lee. She'll find one person that she really, really likes and focus all her attention, everything. He's good about that person. If you talk to him, this is good, that's good. Now, if they do something wrong that she doesn't like, it's switched around. She'll hate their guts that fast.
Yes, that is an example of what we talked about earlier when we talked about the ingratiating behavior with respect to the borderline personality disorder and how, in terms of manifestation, that you get differences in terms of reaction, where there is the behavior designed to ingratiate oneself with another, and that the other person then is considered to be, is idealized. And then when something happens, either real or perceived, then the break in control comes, and the person then acts out either towards herself or towards someone else. But you get the changeability in behavior as a result of the breakdown with respect to coping and control mechanisms.
In her statement, she also, the statement I was just reading to you from is what we call the Citrus County statement to Investigator Paget.
Yes.
There's another statement from Laurie Grody that you have.
Yes.
The one from Officer Goretzky from Upper Michigan.
That's correct, yes.
And in that statement, there are records regarding things that Laurie has said. This is the Goretzky statement. It's just the general.
That's all right. I'd like to be able to follow along.
I haven't asked the questions. The Goretzky statement also provides information
That's
regarding
correct.
Laurie's account.
Yes.
In the statement to Officer Paget, the statement to the Citrus County people, Laurie also says that Lee was the kind of person that you wanted to like, but just couldn't connect with her.
That is correct. That is often how individuals suffering a borderline personality disorder are described by people who observe them. And that goes back to what I alluded to earlier in terms of the internal conflicts experienced by those individuals. On the one hand, they desperately seek nurturance and support, but because of the lack of trust, the fear of betrayal, the likelihood or the sensing of eventual abandonment, you get the kind of approach avoidance situation, so that people want to reach out, want to be accepting, but on the other hand, they are alienated by the lack of trust. And on the part of the individual, there is this confusion and this conflict. On the one hand, I want the nurturance. On the other hand, I don't think I deserve it, and I know, based upon my history, that I'm going to be eventually betrayed and abandoned.
And Laurie discussed the mood swings, the change of affect that Lee always had.
That is correct, and that has been consistent over time.
She was also asked in that statement by a prosecutor from Marion and Citrus counties, a fellow by the name of Tony Tabby, whether Lee had any strengths. You recall Laurie's answer to that?
Mm-hmm.
Her answer was no, nothing.
That is correct.
Is that consistent with a person with a borderline personality disorder?
That is consistent because what we have, in essence, as I have attempted to describe, is really a breakdown in control and management mechanisms, so that the kind of mechanisms that we often think about that allow us to engage in long-range planning, that allow us to control our impulses, that allow us to learn from our past mistakes, those mechanisms are not there. Those strengths are not there. And that is what we're talking about in the case of Ms. Wuornos.
All of these things we've been talking about, you relied upon in formulating your opinion.
That's correct, yes.
Laurie also talked about the fact that Lee believed that folks were out to get her when she was young. Is that consistent with a person suffering from a borderline personality disorder?
That's very consistent And on the one hand, individuals might describe it as paranoid behavior, but on the other hand, it has some basis in reality by virtue of the fact that the individual's experiences and contact with other individuals have not been rewarding, have not been positive. It's been basically negative.
And regarding the family, Lori was asked by the investigator Paget, did Aileen get praised for positive accomplishments? For instance, like a good report card. If she did well on a project, would she be praised for it? Referring to the grandparents, and Lori said, I can't remember that she was. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And is that something that's consistent with the familial discord that you discussed?
It is consistent in terms of familial discord and dysfunctional family operations.
You watched the video
Yes, I did.
where Ms. Wuornos provided statements to law enforcement.
Yes.
You also talked at length about the facts of the offense regarding Mr. Mallory and your diagnosis.
Yes.
You do know various accounts regarding the facts of the offense.
Yes.
You have the video, you have the accounts of Dr. McMahon, the accounts to the other doctors, you have investigative reports, you have all sorts of information on it.
Yes.
Is there anything in the DSM-3R or in any other recognized criteria that indicates that a diagnosis is built on a specific instance?
No, it is not. Diagnosis is never made on one particular instance.
And her diagnosis, her impairments, her deficiencies, her disorder, those have been with her whole life.
That is correct. Long-standing duration.
And they've affected her behavior throughout her life.
Yes, that is correct.
I have nothing further to add.
Yes, Doctor, she didn't start killing people because she got a .22 pistol and started carrying it, though, did she?
I think she's charged with killing individuals. I think if you talk about the
I
diagnosis...
think that's only a yes or no. She didn't start killing people
Objection, Your
until...
Honor.
Let me finish the question.
Well, let me finish the answer.
I asked simply, she didn't start killing people until after she got the .22 pistol and started carrying it, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Even though she's had this personality defect for 34 years, right?
That's correct.
In the review of what her sister said, where her sister said that she thought about hospitalizing her, but just before that, she described an event where Aileen attacked her on the couch with a skewer, didn't she?
Yes, I recall that.
Went for her throat.
Yes.
So that was when Aileen was what, only 18?
I'm not sure about the age.
And then in 78, back in 78, she thought she ought to commit her to a mental institution or something.
I believe so, yes.
Also, the mother, Tully, was interviewed extensively, and when she was asked if any of her relatives, that would include her father, right?
Yes.
Had ever sexually touched her, fondled her, abused her, her answer was no, wasn't it?
That's correct.
No history of the grandfather sexually abusing Eileen's mother, is there?
Based upon her perceptions, no.
Well, not based upon the mother's perceptions. Tully.
That's what I'm saying, not based upon that.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ms. Knowles?
I would just have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
The familial relationship as involving strict parents.
Yes.
She also described Ms. Wuornos. Could the description she gave about Ms. Wuornos as a child be called bizarre?
Her description of this?
Yeah, when she was talking about what he was like.
Yes,
Now, those consistent with a disturbed child.
that is. As I've indicated earlier, there were a number of cries for help that evidently were never heeded. And as a result, we get behavior that does what you would expect. It becomes worse as time goes on. So early on, there are signs, there are cues that something
Objection,
is
Your Honor.
wrong.
There's not a question. Now we're getting speech.
That's where you go out, sir.
Keep going.
What happens is when there is insufficient or no intervention, you can expect that behavior will deteriorate.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Judge.
No questions?
You the witness or maybe get a jar.
You may be discharged, Your Honor.
Sorry, where, sir?
Yeah.
May stand down, sir. Or we will let it.